Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to 500 Seconds on Wrestling. I am your host, David Gibb. That's DAVIDGIBB. Better known on Twitter as Dave Writes Junk. That's @ Dave, as in my name, Writes, as in that thing you do with a pencil, and Junk, as in that thing which is typically kept in the trunk. I thank you for joining me for my first podcast today. For about the last 6 months, I've been publishing weekly blogs at 500onwrestling.com. That's 500onwrestling.com or at 500onwrestling on Twitter. The goal of the site has always been to elevate the level of dialogue about wrestling, to keep it very intelligent, very focused, very different, but short. I value conciseness. There are thousands of wrestling podcasts out there, and some of them are very good, but many of them are very long. So part of the goal here with 500 Seconds on Wrestling is to bring you a really concise wrestling podcast. Each week, I'll be covering just one topic, sometimes alone, sometimes with a guest. My goal isn't going to be to discuss every angle of it because we don't have the time. But what I am trying to do here is stimulate some conversation, give you something that you can go talk to your friends about, because really, that's when wrestling dialogue is at its best. Speaking of friends, I'm going to be joined by one of my closest ones today, Mr. Nick Bond, and the two of us will be talking about WWE World Champion Seth Rollins. Our conversation up next. All right, I am joined now by Nick Bond. Nick, thank you so much for being my very first guest ever, and welcome to 500 Seconds on Wrestling.
Hello, David. How's it going?
Oh, I'm doing great. Excited to be talking to you. So I won't beat around the bush here. Part of this podcast is about not wasting time, about being concise. So, Nick, I know who you are, but many of those listening may not. So why don't you take, maybe 30 seconds just to introduce yourself, tell me who you are, what do you do, where can you be found on the internets?
My name is Nick Bond. I am one of your best friends from college, and I also run The Classical with some friends at theclassical.org, and Juice Make Sugar, also with some friends at juicemakesugar.com, and I'm on Twitter at the Nickster with an 1 instead of an I. So those are the places on the internet that I am.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I'm really, really glad to have you, and I'm really glad to have you here to speak about this specific topic. You have, for the last months, at least on a weekly basis, been texting me to extol the virtues of one Seth Rollins. So I want to ask you, Nick, why is Seth Rollins so great?
Well, he's great for two reasons, and this is something our mutual friend and Darren and I have talked about. He is a wrestling character who's aware of the tropes of wrestling but still exists within their confines. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, he plays with the fourth wall, but isn't a super magician who can change all of the rules in the thing he's in. Like, he knows, I have to be friends with guys in the Authority because Brock Lesnar's going to kill me. And I understand that I've watched a lot of professional wrestling. I know how far I can push.
That's great. You know, our mutual friend, Darren Jackson, he always used to joke about there were two kinds of wrestlers who watched wrestling and wrestlers who did not watch wrestling. And, did they make those psychological blunders? Did they turn their back on their tag team partner right after they had accidentally gotten rolled up? That guy doesn't watch wrestling. So Seth Rollins watches wrestling. I agree. I think a lot of what you were just talking about really could be seen on Raw with the whole gift-giving bit that he did with J&J and Kane, kind of showing his appreciation. What did you think of that segment?
I loved it, and I understand why people complained about it, because it went a little too long, and they didn't have the Chekhov's car, because it's wrestling, so they're expecting that catalog. But then you realize, that was also a Cadillac commercial.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But that's the most beautifully heelish thing I can think of, is Seth Rollins doing a Cadillac commercial in the middle of an opening segment that people constantly complain is all talking. And it was perfect because it's very reminiscent. They're talking about this on Cheap Heat. It's very reminiscent of The Rock and the Nation of Domination when he gives them all the Rolexes, and then he gives Farouk
I thought of that.
picture of himself. Like, that's what I was expecting it to be, was a picture of himself.
Mm-hmm.
But it turned out to be the trip to Hawaii, which I also thought was great. And Kane's doing really great work with Seth Rollins.
Absolutely. Do you think, let me ask, Seth Rollins, we're talking about him as a great heel, we're talking about it as a great segment. Should a great heel have entertaining segments where he winks at us? Just philosophically, what do you think?
I think whether or not you like it is separate from whether or not you understand what they're trying to do. Like, he is hated by... He's one of the few guys that gets actual, genuine heel heat. And part of that is, I think, and I could be wrong, but the smarks in the crowd that don't like to boo the bad guys because they're told not to.
Right.
He does just enough of that stuff to piss them off.
Yeah.
But in a way that he's like, he doesn't let them get so angry they're doing them. Well, they don't know what they're talking about or how to push anybody.
I mean, even him just putting over Kane, like verbally, is a great example of what you're saying, because those same fans hate Kane. You know what I mean?
Yes,
like every time he gets in the ring, it's just like, okay, let's make no noise.
Yeah. He pushes, he knows what buttons to push, and that's the way in which, to me, he's genre savvy, and that's what that character, he's genre savvy. He doesn't exist outside of the genre. He isn't like a fifth dimension. He's not Batmite, but he has like all of the knowledge of Batmite.
You have I won't say exhaustive, but you have a impressive knowledge of sort of all things media, of books, movies, television, comics, video games, etc. So I want to ask you, since Seth is our topic, can you give me someone else who Seth reminds you of, be it another fictional character for another genre, or it could be another wrestler? Who does Seth Rollins remind you of?
So my friend Jared and I always have these conversations about professional athletes. So I'm kind of trained. My brain works in a very specific way that allows this to happen. And I was thinking about it because you mentioned just that you want to talk about Seth Rollins. And this was what I was thinking. I don't know how many of your listeners have ever seen The West Wing, but he reminds me a lot of Josh Lyman, Bradley Whitford's character, who's based off of Rahm Emanuel, the President Obama's former chief of staff. And in the first episode, he almost gets fired for telling off a conservative Christian on a talk show. And to me, that's the perfect, he knows that he shouldn't be doing things, but is seeing how far he can push it. And he's at his best, because that's one of his best episodes, this Josh Lyman character. He's at his best when he's caught in the, uh-oh, I might get fired. Uh-oh, I might get in trouble.
Oh.
There's this, he goes into pure survival mode, and he's such a gifted performer that it works really, really well for him as a character. And if you ever get a chance to watch The West Wing, that is Josh's, best character. Is his ability to, he gets knocked down hard, and he stays down for a little bit, but he always gets up. And I think Seth Rollins, and it's weird because he's a heel, but Seth Rollins is always a step ahead, and I think that's not him being smarter or better. It's him working really hard to be smarter or better, if that makes sense.
The thing that you said there that I absolutely agree with is, you see that moment in Seth when he switches over into actually being scared. When he is suddenly intimidated by the babyface, when he suddenly knows he can't win fair. And I think that's what makes him a great heel. He's got that little bit of Ric Flair in him, where I'm the best in the world, I can do anything, I can beat everybody. And then the second he realizes he can't, then it's, then you see that switch flip, and then he becomes both scared but also more aggressive as a heel.
Yeah, like a cornered animal who is also smart.
Exactly. Well, we are just about out of time. Nick, thank you so much for joining me on my first episode.
Of course. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
We'll talk again soon, all right?
Sounds good.
All right. That concludes my conversation with Mr. Nick Bond on the topic of Seth Rollins. I thank you so much for listening to the first edition of 500 Seconds on Wrestling, and hope you will join me again next week. Remember to follow me at Dave Writes Junk, and follow the blog at 500, that's 500, on wrestling. I hope this brought a little joy to your day. Just knowing that you exist brought joy to mine.